Will and Ariel Durant may be forgotten today, but they are my favorite historians and they have made a huge impact on the field of history. Hey, Cypher here with another episode of Historians Who Changed History. The Durants are now pretty much set aside by new historians because those historians are too focused on their particular subjects, but that didn't used to always be the case. For nearly half a century, Will and Ariel Durant's series of books called The Story of Civilization were considered to be a requisite for any historian's library. I've got my set right here, and a first edition of William Durant's earlier book. They were groundbreaking books when they came out. Firstly, William Durant was not a professional historian, which might be why so many historians disregard him today. But he at least was a philosophy professor. Despite that, he cites more sources than most history professors did at the time. Most professors were narrowly focused on their very particular subject, rather than the totality of their profession. William Durant wanted to change that. He started his work with his first book, The Story of Philosophy. In this book, he tries to give the entire history of philosophy all the way up until Nietzsche. Durant contextualized the different ideas of philosophy into their historic background rather than studying them in isolation, and even explains how some of these philosophers made a tremendous impact on the non-philosophical world. He is so specific, dense, and nuanced that he's able to compact so much information into this tiny little book, and way more than pretty much any historian you will ever read. It's pretty masterful, but since it's such a limited format, he had to skip a great deal. But that's alright, because he put more in one history of philosophy than anyone before him. This book was such a success that a whole bunch of other philosophers decided to follow suit, including Bertrand Russell. If you're interested in reading a history of philosophy, I would recommend Russell's book because it's thicker than Durant's, and covers a lot more. But that's only because Russell was trying to copy Durant. The story of philosophy wasn't enough for Durant, and so he went on to do the same thing for the whole of history. Obviously, telling the whole of history is no easy feat, but he managed to do better than anyone before and pretty much anyone since. It was such a tremendous task that Will enlisted his wife Ariel. Will actually resigned his post as a professor to marry Ariel in 1913. And so they were able to go full bore into researching and writing a series of books after William's first book. And so The Story of Civilization is an 11-book series. The first book came out in 1935 and the last came out in 1975. They had more planned but didn't live long enough to write any more. Both of them died within a couple days of each other in 1981. These new big history folks that Bill Gates likes so much, or your standard run-of-the-mill ugly textbook, can't hold a candle to the scholarship that's on display in The Story of Civilization. It is very dense and extremely comprehensive. Though they only wrote one book on the Orient, as in from North Africa all the way to Japan, this one book holds vastly more information than your standard world history book does, and that's in small print. As with The Story of Philosophy, The Story of Civilization is extremely thick and dense and particular and pretty much anything else you can imagine. It's useful reference material, but it's probably harder to get through than the incomprehensible mumbo-jumbo of a post-structuralist or Hegel. But that being said, if you want to have an excellent reference library, you're incomplete without Durant. Because with The Story of Civilization, Will and Ariel Durant managed to synthesize a great deal of world history into one place. Because of that, they became mandatory reference material for decades. Their influence has begun to wane, but nothing has come to replace them. They still represent the most comprehensive telling of the entire history of the world. And they ended with the Napoleonic Age. So imagine what they could have done with a little bit more time left on Earth. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out some previous episodes while you're at it. I'll see you next time.